Hey everyone, I am absolutely thrilled you're joining us for this explainer today. We are diving into a topic that honestly just completely blew my mind. We're looking at the actual massive global scale history of Black life. We're going to zoom way out, far beyond the typical kind of condensed curriculum most of us got in school, to uncover a story that is just vastly more rich and complex than I ever realized. Right out of the gate, our source material drops a really crucial warning on us. You know the old saying, history is written by the winners? Well, it's true. Most of the historical record was shaped by people who had a vested interest in how the story was told. Colonial administrators wrote about the people they colonized, and enslavers wrote about the enslaved. That means the historical record we rely on is often flattened, distorted, or just missing huge chunks of the truth, because someone gained from keeping it incomplete. Understanding that distortion is the absolute first step to actually finding the real story. So, to get to that truth, here is our roadmap. We are going to cover over 100,000 years of history today, broken down into 5 clear chapters. The opening human chapter, sophisticated states and empires, destruction and resistance, eras of backlash and rebuilding, and finally, the global cultural legacy. Let's jump right in.
All right, Chapter 1, the opening human chapter. Because to really understand this, we have to start at the actual beginning, not the middle.
And when I say the beginning, I mean a staggering 100,000 years ago. Africa is the literal origin point of anatomically modern Homo sapiens. Basically, every single human being alive today traces their ancestry back to this continent. So the really crucial takeaway here is that Black history isn't just a chapter sort of inserted into the human story. It is the opening of the entire human story. For most of the past 100,000 years, African societies thrived in ways that are almost hard to comprehend. You have hunter-gatherer communities like the San people of southern Africa, who maintain one of the oldest continuously documented ways of life on Earth. And across the Sahel and Great Lakes regions, you see complex agricultural communities developing these brilliant systems of land management long before any external contact.
Okay, moving right along to Chapter 2, sophisticated states and empires. If we look over the last 3,000 years, we see the rise of these massive, incredibly sophisticated states that genuinely shocked later European visitors. These centuries absolutely prove that Black history does not start with slavery. I mean, 3,000 years ago, the kingdom of Kush grew so powerful it literally conquered Egypt, giving the ancient world Nubian pharaohs. Fast forward to the 4th century, and you have the Aksumite kingdom in present-day Ethiopia. They were one of the 4 great powers of the ancient world, alongside Rome, Persia, and China. They minted their own coins and adopted Christianity centuries before most of Europe did. Later, you've got Great Zimbabwe building these massive, precisely constructed stone cities with absolutely zero mortar. And of course, the medieval West African empires of Ghana, Mali, and Songhai, who controlled the entire global gold and salt trade across the Sahara for about 1,000 years. But honestly, my absolute favorite detail happens in the year 1324. Picture this. The ruler of the Mali Empire, Mansa Musa, goes on a pilgrimage to Mecca. His entourage was huge, numbering in the tens of thousands, and they carried so much gold with them that spending it along the way reportedly crashed the gold prices across the entire Mediterranean economy for more than a decade. Talk about causing inflation on a vacation, right? Just let the sheer scale of that wealth sink in for a second. And right there, within that same Mali Empire, was the city of Timbuktu, which was one of the greatest centers of Islamic learning in the world. Their universities housed hundreds of thousands of manuscripts covering high-level mathematics, astronomy, law, medicine, and theology. It's just incredible to realize that these were deeply intellectual, highly governed societies way before European contact. Which brings us to a heavy pivot in Chapter 3, destruction, survival, and resistance. The 15th century marks the devastating collision of the transatlantic slave trade. We really need to contrast the popular myth with the actual historical reality here. The standard, kind of sanitized narrative often frame this as a civilizing rescue operation of primitive peoples. But the historical reality, as our sources firmly point out, is that this was the systematic destruction of advanced civilizations that had been developing for thousands of years. It was a violent severing of entire communities, languages, and complex social structures. And the numbers involved are frankly hard to absorb. Between 10 and 12 million Africans survived the horrific ocean crossing of the Middle Passage, with countless others dying during capture or the journey itself. And it was their forced labor that generated the massive agricultural surplus, which literally bankrolled the industrial development of Europe and North America. The economic foundations of the modern world were built directly on this system. But amidst all that, resistance was absolutely constant, culminating in acts of extraordinary self-liberation. Take the year 1804 and the Haitian Revolution. This is still one of the most incredible political events in modern history. Enslaved people actually overthrew the army of Napoleon Bonaparte to establish the first free Black republic in the Western Hemisphere. And the global response? Decades of economic isolation. In fact, France actually forced Haiti to pay the modern equivalent of tens of billions of dollars in reparations for the loss of their enslaved labor force. Haiti literally had to make those payments until 1947.
We also have to highlight the specific, formidable leadership of Black women here. They faced intensely layered vulnerabilities, including sexual exploitation, but they formed the absolute backbone of the resistance. You've got Harriet Tubman making some 19 incredibly dangerous missions back into slave territory to guide hundreds to freedom. You have the immense rhetorical power of Sojourner Truth. And let's not forget the mothers across generations who preserved cultural and spiritual practices. That wasn't just them coping. That was a deliberate, ongoing political act of resistance.
All right, shifting into Chapter 4, Erases of Backlash and Rebuilding. So the formal abolition of slavery opened up this brief, amazing window of political possibility. During Reconstruction in the U.S., Black Americans were voting and holding political office. But, as we know, that was quickly dismantled by highly organized, violent white supremacist campaigns, which ushered in the Jim Crow era. Yet even under that violently oppressive system, you see brilliant intellectuals producing world-class thought. Frederick Douglass wrote first-order political philosophy. I.W. Wells literally risked her life to conduct meticulous investigative journalism on lynching. And W.E.B. Du Bois developed the concept of double consciousness, which is still one of the most durable, generative frameworks in social thought today. What's truly staggering is the sheer output of resilience during this time. I mean, against all odds, communities built extraordinary institutions. They established historically Black colleges and universities to educate generations of scientists and doctors. They launched massive national media networks like the Chicago Defender, and they completely redefined their own cultural identity through the incredible artistic explosion of the Harlem Renaissance in the 1920s. Which leads us to our final section. Chapter 5, The Global Cultural Legacy. Let's look at how all this exploded onto the world stage. All across the globe, these massive movements were building simultaneously. In the US, the civil rights movement wasn't just some polite moral appeal. It was strategically sophisticated, deeply organized, and used deliberate confrontational tactics to force real legislative victories. At the exact same time, decolonization was sweeping across Africa, with leaders like Kwame Nkrumah doing massive state-building work. And over in South Africa, the African National Congress was fighting the brutal apartheid system, which finally culminated in Nelson Mandela's democratic election in 1994. And actually, speaking of the U.S. civil rights movement, our source material makes a really brilliant point to correct the historical spotlight. It was women like Rosa Parks, Fannie Lou Hamer, Diane Nash, and Polly Murray who did the sustained, grueling organizational work. They were literally the engine that the more famous, charismatic male leaders completely relied upon to succeed. Now, here's a fact that genuinely shocked me. The global dispersion of African-descended people actually predates the transatlantic slave trade by centuries. The Moors, who were largely North and Sub-Saharan African Muslims, were present across the Iberian Peninsula for 800 years. They heavily influenced Spanish and Portuguese culture. There were also significant Black communities in medieval Europe, Persia, India, and Southeast Asia, driven by voluntary migration as well as the Islamic slave trade. So we are talking about a truly ancient, genuinely global presence. Finally, let's just look at the massive cultural bequest left to the modern world. Enslaved people created highly sophisticated syncretic religions like Vodou, Candomblé, and Santeria that cleverly encoded African theology right beneath Christian practices. The Black church emerged as the primary political and educational infrastructure for Black Americans, and the musical traditions forged under immense deprivation gave birth to the blues, jazz, gospel, soul, funk, and hip-hop. Basically, these genres form the foundational DNA for almost all major global popular music today. So the next time you turn on Spotify, you are directly listening to the echoes of this history. Which leaves us with this final, vital question. How does our understanding of modern society change when we actually integrate this vast, complex history into our worldview? When we stop flattening the narrative and recognize the incredible sophistication, resilience, and global impact of Black history, we aren't just learning about the past anymore. We are completely reframing our understanding of human civilization today. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.